And don't be concerned with what other people think. It's all
Right.
about what you think, and just to piggyback on the whole certification thing. That's
True.
not for everybody. I've
True.
heard people in our EA space talk about people don't need certifications, it's not important, it's not a requirement, and
Mhm.
that's valid.
Mhm.
But you know what? That works for Mia. In that role, it added in more and more administrative duties and tasks. And I was like, hey, I kind of like this. And that's when I pivoted into an admin assistant role. And, that shift led me into, just going up the ladder, admin assistant. And then, I went to executive assistant, senior executive assistant, went to the C level, and, the rest is history. It's such a blessing, when you have your executive who is, your strategic partner, you know, when they see your value,
Mhm.
when they believe in you, when they have no remorse with letting people know how important you are to them. He says, I'm going to give you a very valuable piece of information. And it's not just, important for someone that's leading, but it's just important in general. He
True.
said, but always remember, you have two ears and one mouth. So listen more than you speak.
It's such a joy talking to Mia Lane. We never met in person, but I've been following her online on social media. And it's incredible what she shares about her career and her view on the profession. She's highly involved in so many wonderful initiatives. So I cannot wait to introduce the wonderful Mia Lane to all of you. Hello, everybody. We are back with the podcast. I hope you are doing well. And I actually flew over to the States for my next interview partner, but obviously just kidding because there's sadly no chance for me to be in the States right now. That's why we are here once again on Zoom. And I'm very excited to talk to Mia Lane today. Hello, Mia. How are you?
I am good, Diana. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for being here on the show. So tell us, where are you based in the US?
I am based out of Dallas, Texas. And
Always, always a Texan girl or moved to Dallas?
no, actually, well, you could call me a Texan girl. I've been here 30 years, but
Wow.
I'm originally from Topeka, Kansas.
Oh, lovely. So what brought you down to Texas?
My husband and I had been married a year, and he decided he wanted to change. And
Mhm.
so he said, we can either go to Atlanta or we can go to Dallas. And he had a sister in Atlanta. And I said, well, let's go to Dallas because we had some close friends here. I said, so let's just get away from all family. And we made Dallas our home, and it was a great choice.
Well, obviously, as a German, I have to say good choice because Dallas and Dirk Nowitzki and the Mavs, obviously, there is a certain connection between
Yeah,
Germany and Dallas. So good choice. Not going to Georgia.
right. Exactly. Exactly.
So have you, are you into basketball? Have you seen some games where when Dirk was still playing, actually?
Yes, I had been to a couple of Mavericks games. One of the company that I had worked for years back, they used to have season tickets, so I went a couple of times.
Oh, that's amazing. I actually many, many years ago, when I was vacationing in the Dallas vicinity, of course, we went and wanted to see Dirk and
Uh-huh.
see a game. We went to the American Airlines Arena. So that was
Yeah.
a true, true, true gift.
Yes.
Seeing this German guy, of course, we are so proud of him, even if he's
Yeah.
retired now. But
Yeah.
he's such an icon, and every time when he's in Germany doing some promo, and
Uh-huh.
it's just wonderful. And what a career, right?
Yes, and he's so tall.
Yes.
He's so
And
tall.
very humble, very humble.
Yes, yes, yes.
So,
Exactly. And that's
speaking,
a great facility.
right, speaking of career, we're going to talk about your career in a couple of minutes. But first of all, of course, we would love to get to know you a little bit better, Mia. So, who's Mia Lane?
Wow. Mia is married, been married almost 32 years. And we have one daughter who came very late in our marriage. She's a senior in high school. So we're going through all the things, getting ready to get her ready for college and be empty nesters. Wow.
Wow.
Uh, in my free time, I love to shop. I love listening to music. And self-care all the way. I'm a massage junkie.
Oh, I love it. So what's the massage type you are always in? Is it the back, neck, shoulder one, or is it any other types?
You know, back, neck, and shoulders always needs attention, but hey, I'll take the whole body massage.
I'm in for that too,
Yeah,
by the
yeah,
way.
exactly, exactly.
And speaking of music, because you were you're just saying that you enjoy music. So what's on your playlist at the moment? What do you enjoy listening to? Are you in the Christmas mode? Is it Mariah
You know,
Carey on it, or what do you listen?
I do enjoy the Christmas mode, and I do like Mariah Carey, and I also just love listening to Christmas soft jazz, just
Mm,
instrumentals.
I love that.
No, no audio, just instrumentals. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your professional careers? First of all, of course, the number one question, how did
hmm
you become an assistant? Was this always something you had on your mind, like when you were a little girl, thinking of, oh, I want to work in an office, or were there any other dreams that Mia wanted to reach?
excuse me. I started out in customer service. And then I transitioned into an accounting role where I was doing like accounting clerk, accounts receivable. And in that role, it added in more and more administrative duties and tasks. And I was like, hey, I kind of like this. And that's when I pivoted into an admin assistant role. And, that shift led me into, just going up the ladder, admin assistant. And then, I went to executive assistant, senior executive assistant, went to the C level, and, the rest is history.
So when you started this career, and we're going to talk about your current role because you're leading a team of assistants, which is amazing. Congratulations on that. But once this journey started, did you feel like, oh, I really want to be on this career path? And did you motivate yourself, or did you go out and had specific certifications? So maybe you can lead us through a little bit of that journey.
Well, when I initially started, once I got to the senior, executive assistant title, you know, then my focus was I want to support a C level, you
Mm,
know. And so it's like through my career, I kept setting milestones, not only with the position, but financial milestones as well.
right.
And so, you know, going through the journey has been very rewarding for me. And one thing that I like is, as you mentioned, I do manage a team. I've been managing a team just shy of 2 years. But prior to that, for 30 years, I had been doing executive support. And what I tell everybody, even if the opportunity to manage a team 2 years ago wouldn't have happened, I would still happily be doing and providing executive support because that's my passion. And the number one reason why I like the field that I'm in is because no day ever repeats itself.
Oh, yes, that is so true actually.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
also love what you just said before when you felt like, oh, I want to work for someone on the senior level. And that was the same with me. I remember
Yeah.
once I was in the profession and I started out as a junior assistant and I grew into a division assistant and, went up my career ladder. And there was this moment where I said, I want to work for a CEO once.
Yeah.
I want to have this on my bio.
hmm
So this was a clear path for me.
hmm
So coming back to training and development, so because
Yeah.
you were out there speaking at events, so
hmm
was there anything specific you went through that you said, I really wanted to be very good with technology, or I wanted to invest in communications because I know communications is a key for you. What was on your focus on your radar back then?
My focus was, just being the best that I could in this position. So, I learned about I think it was probably halfway through my career at the 15-year mark is where I found out that there were large administrative organizations that just catered and focused to us. And there was career developments. And then I found there were certifications. And so,
Good.
once I found out about that, it was only up from there. I am big excuse me, I am big on certifications.
Mhm.
I have my CAP certification, which is Certified Admin Professional.
Mm.
Underneath my CAP, I have 7 specialties that I just
Wow.
recently acquired, making me have CAP expert status, and that's through IAAP.
Wonderful.
However, through ASAP, I also have my PACE certification. So I always want to invest in myself to become the best that I can.
Mm.
And I'm not stopping there. I know there's a lot of buzz right now around chief of staff, and there being certifications of that out there. I know Maggie Olson has a chief of staff, Nova chief of staff, and there are other people that have chief of staff certifications. And so I'm inquiring, not so sure if I'm going to go down that road or not. But again, I want to be the best that I can so I
Yes.
can be a valuable person to whoever I'm supporting, and also a resource as in leading my team.
Absolutely. And right now, being in the position of leading a team
Mhm.
now since 2 years, and that's also helping you to understand maybe is there more opportunities in management or is there chief of staff as an option? Of course. And I agree. It's a lot of, discussions around the role. And it's honestly, it's not a career path for everyone, right?
Right.
So we
And
really need to be clear on that. Yeah.
that is so true. And it's like, while I see it, one thing about that is I feel like when you are a seasoned strategic EA, there are a lot of things that of the chief of staff role that you already do as an
True.
EA,
True.
because our scope is so broad in what we do, from project management, just a multitude of things. So, it's like, while I say I'm interested, it would be more of a standard of, this is one more thing to
Hmm.
add to my bio
Yes.
that just increases my value.
True. Yeah.
Is that a avenue where I want to go down, being labeled or considered a chief of staff? Not really.
Right. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So when you were offered the role to lead a team,
Yes.
was that something you said, "Yay, here I am. I'm in, of course." Or was there a little ducky sitting on your shoulder, the imposter syndrome kicking in? Can I
There
do
was.
this? Can I do this? Am I the right person? Am I ready? So why don't you tell us a little bit what you went through back then?
When the opportunity was extended to me by my former executive, Scott Howard, it was funny. He came to me and he says, I'm thinking I want to change the way my organization is ran. And, I think I want the EAs in the organization to report into a manager. And I
Mm.
think this would be something good for you. And I was like, I kind of had this look on my face, and he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, I was asked about management 10 years ago, and that's just not something that I was warm and fuzzy about. And I said, so, I know there's a lot of work entailed in being a manager. There's good and bad,
True.
and I said, can I have some time to think about it? And he's like, sure, take all the time you need, but just know that, I would be here to mentor you. I have a staff that is here to mentor you. And then, of course, I know that you have other executives and people in your community that can
Hmm.
mentor you as well. So, you know, I'm going to just leave it there. And so, I came home, talked to my husband, and of course, my husband and my daughter like, do it, do it, do it. And I was like, no, I want you to know that you all will be affected in my beginning stages.
Right.
I'm not going to be as accessible to you all as my family, because I'm going to be doing a lot of things in my new role. And they're like,
Yep.
oh, we're fine. We got it, And so, after, thoughts and prayers, I thought, I can do this. One thing that my father instilled in me, you know, years ago was, you are somebody, and you can do whatever you put your mind to. You just have to believe it, and don't be concerned with what other people think. It's all
Right.
about what you think, and just to piggyback on the whole certification thing, that's
True.
not for everybody. I've
True.
heard people in our EA space talk about, people don't need certifications, it's not important, it's not a requirement, and
Hmm.
that's valid.
Hmm.
But you know what? That works for Mia. So I don't care about when people say, oh, that's not for me. It's not valuable. It's a waste of money, yada, 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 in one ear and
I
out the other.
I
It
agree.
investment in myself. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I want to give a shout out to Scott here, because offering also the mentorship for you, because
Yes.
I think that's for you, that was part of the deal, right? That you
Yes.
knew you could always reach out to him. And obviously, I can only imagine that you created your sounding board around you, right?
Exactly. And even though our relationship ended in October, the end of September, because he retired, um, I still am connected with him. And, he's still an active mentor, for
Good.
me and mentor and friend.
So once again, hi Scott. I hope you're listening to that or even watching us. You have a great, great, great assistant here, former assistant, I have to say, sadly now. So we need more of the Scots out there who do see so much in their assistants and give them a platform, give them a stage, how
Exactly.
you can grow, right? And I've encountered the same. There were
Exactly.
situations where my executive knew that I'm ready for the next step, where I felt like, no, no, I'm not ready. I'm not
Yeah.
going
Yeah.
out there, right?
Right.
But they kind of pushed me gently, and I'm very grateful for that. I think it was even the first, pathway towards my independent work now that I'm a solopreneur for almost 8 years now. Yeah.
Yes. And,
They gave me the foundation.
it's such a blessing, when you have your executive who is, your strategic partner, you know, when they see your value,
Mm,
when they believe in you,
mm.
when they have no remorse with letting people know how important you are to them, it's just, I'm at a loss of words, because
Yes,
it's just, I'm so grateful for, what he has done for me in my career. And then just as a mentor and friend. And, so it's funny because when I first started leading, he says, I'm going to give you a very valuable piece of information. And it's not just, important for someone that's leading, but it's just important in general. He
true.
said, but always remember, you have two ears and one mouth. So listen more than you speak.
That's
And
fabulous.
I had to say it a few times before it registered. But then once I got it,
Mhm.
I was like, you know what? That's very good feedback. And
It
that's
is.
something that I have incorporated. And I try to lead the way I want to be led.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not a micromanager.
Good.
I want, and now I'm not going to say that it was not hard initially when I started leading, because when you become a leader, you get to delegate. Mia was used to doing all the things by herself. Oh, you need this, this, and this? Done.
Right,
And then it's like, you have a team.
right.
Your team can help you. And I say to my team, we are in this together. We are partners as, a team. I said, it's not manager and team. It's we are on the same level, because I learn from people on my team.
True.
Everyone has their own, thing that they are expertise in, and so, I enjoy the fact that I can learn from my team and I can depend on them. And it's funny because the first time that I said, okay, I'm going to delegate some stuff to my team and I'm just going to say, okay, I'll give them the task or whoever it is. And I'll say, do you have any questions? Is it clear? Deadline, ask. Yep, golden. I said, okay, I'm going to fall back. And I did. And
Wonderful.
the first time I was like, okay, I feel like I'm having anxiety, but I know it's going to be fine. And then once everything happened, without missing a beat, it was like, oh,
It,
wow, this is great,
it is. It
and
is.
we're all human, and that's one thing that I do like with my team that I have with, it's a safe space where we are authentic with one another, and their feedback to me as a manager, they know I'm a work in progress. I say it all the time,
Mm,
but the only way that I'm going to get better is by getting your feedback.
mm.
And they say, Mia, it works the same way for us. So, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. And coming back to the brilliant advice from Scott, with the two ears and the one mouth.
Mhm.
Um, and it's exactly what we do, what I did as a first-time manager back then. Listening, observing, right?
Yes.
And also seeing the strength and the talents of the people around us. Which task do I give to this person? What do I give to that person? What is
Mhm.
one of your leadership principles that you say this is a non-negotiable for me? That is something that I it's so in me, how I lead.
I want everyone on my team to be passionate about what they're doing. I am very passionate about this space.
Mm.
And despite leading a team, I'm still supporting an executive. I was supporting Scott as the chief digital officer. Once he departed, I was, pivoted. So I'm supporting another executive, Ganesh Farr. And so,
Yes.
I like the fact that I can lead, but still be in the trenches doing the work, and I can advocate for the ladies on my team with their executives because I know what they're going through because I'm doing the same thing with them.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the wonderful thing because you know exactly what the role is all about, right? And
exactly.
you know the expectation management coming from the executive part. And that's wonderful that you
Right.
really help them lead to really understand the needs, right?
Yes. And I,
Um,
and I, and I just say, with that, asking them, I want you to be passionate about what you're doing because, tomorrow is not promised. And
yes.
the last thing you want to be is miserable in what you're doing. And so I told them the analogy that I've used is if you get tired of playing in this ball game, and you want to plan another one, let me know.
Mm.
If you want to look for another role here in our company, or if you want to look for a role outside of the company, let me help. Let me advocate for you. I can give you a strong reference, but the end of the day, what I want is for you to be happy.
Oh, that's wonderful. Very, very good. So, there's another passion of you going
Mhm.
more and more on stages and sharing your wonderful wisdom that you have grown into all these years being out there in the profession. And one of the key topics you speak about is executive partnership, right?
Yes.
And looking back at the career you had and you're still in, the time you had with Scott, but also the other executives you served and the one you're currently serving.
Mhm.
So we all want to hear it, Mia. Bring it out to us. Is there a secret sauce to have the best executive partnership?
I would say the secret sauce is three things. Well, it's more than that, but three things that really resonate with me is trust, transparent communication, and alignment. So, you have to understand their priorities. You have to anticipate their needs. You are an extension of them. So
Sure.
I always carry myself as such. At the end of the day, I'm a reflection of who I'm supporting and then just a reflection as a leader in general. And so you want that to always, people are going to think what they think, and you
Mm.
have to take some people with a grain of salt. But, you know, I'm very conscious of how I lead and how I act, so I think that, being able to be authentic with your executive, because it's so funny because there are times where I will go in the office and spin my head around on my shoulders and I'm saying all the things and then they'll look at me and say, "Okay, are you done?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm done. I feel better." And then it's like, but the one thing that they know is despite me being able to flip out per se. That's being extra, but anyways, you know what I'm saying.
I know exactly.
They know that at the end of the day, that when I get behind the keyboard, when I get in front of the people, or when I get, on the phone, that I am carrying myself accordingly. So, yeah,
Wonderful. But hey, speaking of office, are you an office person or a remote person?
I am 100% remote. However, I do travel because I have, on my team, I have someone in the Lowell, Massachusetts office. And then I have two in the Weston, Florida office.
Mm.
And then my executive, Ganesh, is also in Weston, Florida. And then I have one person that is in Ireland.
Oh, wow. So you're
Yeah,
going over
yeah.
to Europe once in a while then, huh?
I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet, but it would be nice, But
We we just need
more,
to find you a speaking gig in Europe, so
you
then
know,
there's another reason to come.
more importantly, even though while I would love to see Ireland, more importantly, I would love for Joanna on my team to come to the States to where I could have all my team together for a day or two. So
Yes,
that's more
that's
important to
that's
me.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But isn't it wonderful to have the people all over the place, with their different, settings and cultures, Ireland and everything. It's so
Yeah.
rewarding, even if you don't get to be together all the time. But technology's out there. We love
And
it. We deal with
technology
it.
is great because even though, I do travel between Lowell and Weston, but I also, it's like we're in the room, just like me and you.
True.
We're on
It's
video
true.
and I'm getting to see you and you're getting to see me. And so, when all of us get on the screen and we have our Brady Bunch squares, it's like we're in the same room.
It is so true.
Yeah.
And by the way, speaking of technology, you've been
Uh-huh.
working with CIOs and CDOs. Actually, I was serving a chief digital officer myself
Oh,
back
nice.
a few years back.
Uh-huh.
And isn't it great to have a seat at these tables when they talk about innovation, about technology, about AI, of course, nowadays.
Right.
So is it obviously that you are a tech person yourself? Did you go into that field a lot, or sometimes you feel like, oh, it's kind of overwhelming, with the AI stuff coming, and how do I keep up? How do I do all my trainings? There's a Microsoft Copilot here, and there's
Right.
ChatGPT there. So what
It's
are
very
your thoughts
overwhelming.
here?
Yes, it's very overwhelming, but I'm trying to get more engaged in technology. I am all about AI. I feel like, and it's funny because I shared with, not only my team, but just other people that I know that, it's not, you don't let AI do all the work.
Mm,
AI is a helper. That's
right.
something to help you work smarter, not harder.
Mm.
So some people are scared. One of my external friends, who's an EA, she's like, I'm scared of AI. I don't want to use it. I'm scared, and then once I just showed her how I use it, with, just communications and just with simple things, I said, I can just put my random thoughts out there and then, it'll
Yeah,
come back and spit something out. And I'm like, you know what? My voice sounds like I want to say this and done,
true.
60 seconds later, it's like done, you just shaved off time off of my day, of having to sit there because Mia Lane tends to be an overthinker at times, and her executive has to tell her, Mia, don't overthink it, just do it.
So now you just delegate it over to AI. They're going to do it for you, right?
Yeah,
Are there,
AI help me out and then let me do a few tweaks and make it my own, and it's one and done.
so is there any specific tool you want to highlight that you say, hey, this is really one of my favorite out there?
You know, um, as far as having a favor, I've just been kind of dabbling in different things. One thing that I was recently introduced to me, maybe 6 months ago, which is not even like great, but it was Snagit. I used to use the sniffing tool, but then I
Mm.
was introduced to Snagit, and you can do all the things with Snagit as far as, even, once you snag it, you can move things around, you can make a video and then it saves all my snags, and
Yes.
so that's one thing that I'm really loving right now.
Hmm.
Um, and then of course, I have Copilot. I like Chat GPT more than Copilot, but I use both.
So have you guys been using it already for, using it as taking the minutes during a Teams call? Have you tried it out already?
Yes,
Are,
yes,
are
yes.
you are you happy with the quality so far? Because I always have mixed reviews, what I hear.
Yeah, sometimes, it's anything helps, but,
Mm,
you do have to sometimes go back and make some tweaks, but
mm,
it's still a huge help.
mm.
Yeah.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
And this is also what we've seen and you have seen because you have been out there for quite a while in the profession, how we transition into new duties and new skills are needed. So is it something that you feel like, oh, this is going to be on my, learning list for 2025? I really want to go more into AI, or is there any other field you feel like you want to learn a little bit? Are you someone who is creating a bucket list in terms of goal setting, or how do you approach this?
I'm very active in attending conferences and webinars because I feel like learning is power. And so I don't really have a set thing of what I want to dive into. I want all the things, anything that's going to make Mia a better version of herself.
Yes,
And, I am grateful that we have large organizations out there catering to what we do. And and as I go to different conferences and I'm trying to build up my presence on LinkedIn, it's just your network is your net worth.
true.
And you know, I I'm coming out of my shell. So 2025, 2024 was progress for me, because, I don't know if you are aware, but I did win the 2024 IAAP Partnership Award with Scott Howitt. That
I
happened.
was not aware. Oh my God, I'm such a bad researcher here. Okay,
No.
congratulations here. Oh my
It's
goodness.
Yes, I applied for it. In 2023, we applied, and it's funny because I went to Scott and I said, Scott, there's a partnership award, and we're going to apply. And he's like, okay, what are we doing? And I was like, so I had to complete a questionnaire,
Good.
and then so I completed the questionnaire, and then I met with him, and I said, okay, here's all the answers that I've came up with. What do you want to add? And he gave me his feedback and said, add this in, add that in, whatever. And so then we submitted the application, and then him and I had to join the IAAP panel and do an interview. It was like 30 minutes of them interviewing us in our partnership. You know, Scott is such a seasoned veteran when it comes to public speaking. He was just like, oh, it's a piece of cake. And I'm here, with all my notes and just frazzled, because I'm not comfortable with public speaking. And that's another thing that Mia is trying to get better at.
Oh,
So,
I'm loving your goals.
we did not win in 2023. And I was like, okay. And then 2024, January, February came around. I said, Scott, we're doing this again. And he's like, we are. And I said, we are. And so I said, I am confident. I have faith in us. We deserve it, and I said, and I have a good story. And he was like, okay. And so we went through the whole regimen again. And lo and behold, I got
Whoa.
an email in May saying, you and Scott have won the partnership award. And
And it
so
was in New York, right?
it was in New York City
Woohoo.
at the Marriott Marquis. And guess what? The conference took place, the gala happened 2 days after Scott and his wife went on PTO to Spain.
No way.
So he had to play. I mean, besides being a personal PTO trip, anything else he would have canceled his schedule. But the blessing was he says, can I do a video? And so I went back to IAAP and I said, Scott can't attend. He would love to, show a video of him. And they said, yes. So then,
Oh.
we have a great AV team at UKG, partnered with them. The three of us got on, I was just on, back in the cut listening. He did one or two takes and they played his 2-minute video before I walked out on the stage.
Oh.
And it was like he was in the room.
And back in Spain, he had a sangria on you, hopefully, right?
Yeah. It was
Oh,
great. It was
oh,
great.
that's amazing. That's a
Yeah.
fantastic story. Thank you so much for sharing this. And you know what? I
Hmm.
love that you didn't give up, Okay,
No.
2023 was not a win, but hey, it's 2024. We're
Yeah.
gonna do it all again. And I love that
And
attitude.
he was just as excited as I was when I told him, oh my God, and it's funny because I could not call him because he was in an executive QBR,
Right.
so I am texting him and I was like, I can't text on my phone because I'll be backstage. So I got on my iPad and I'm texting back, wait, he's like, oh, this is great. This is great. So,
Oh,
and then
I'm
after
so
he got
happy for
the
you.
meeting, he called me and, and I got to yell and scream and everything. But yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. What an
So we
achievement.
both have a nice on my bookshelf over there. I have my nice plaque and IAAP Melissa, the CEO, and Rachel, her partner,
Oh,
they
they're a great
were able
team.
to send him his own because, you know, he wanted his own too. So on his bookshelf, in his office, he has his plaque as well. So,
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, fabulous. So, what do you think of our profession? Where are we heading to? I mean, there's AI here, there's technology there, there's automation coming. How
oh
do
my goodness.
how do we stay relevant? How do you motivate your team also to think big, to have a growth mindset?
Yes, I encourage them to be their best self, and like I said, um, there are so many ways that you can do that, but it's dependent on the individual, so we take goals very seriously, in our team. And, that has to do with your performance. And I say, partner with your executive to see how can you help them, what can you take off them to make their life easier, because you're being a strategic partner. So, you know, um, finding what motivates each person in their profession that's going to make them better. I just encourage that. But I
True.
can't, it's not up to me to tell them how that can happen
Mm,
because each one of us operate differently.
true.
And that goes to when someone is given a task, or asked to do something, all you want to do is confirm they understand the ask.
Mm,
But how they get from A to Z, it's not your business.
it is so true. Yeah.
Because there are so many different ways that you can get there. And as long as the end result is what you asked for,
Hmm.
who cares?
Yeah. It's so true. You can mentor people, but they need to pave their own ways, of course, right? I
Exactly.
fully agree.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
it's all about, and you said it before, because you are a constant learner. You are, always hungry for knowledge. And I think that's the best recipe, if we're getting too comfortable, then it's
Ex-
getting dangerous. If we
Exactly.
believe too much in, oh, that's my standard here, that's my routine, I've been doing it this way for the past 25 years, then it's getting dangerous, right?
And that also
So,
goes back to the whole growth mindset piece.
yes,
You know,
totally.
because in our profession, what is the one thing that we have to do on a daily basis? The one word, pivot.
True.
Things happen. Stop what you're doing, pivot, do something else. So we have to, we can't look at that
Mm,
while it can be challenging because you could have just spent, 30 minutes aligning 10 executive calendars that are all, at the upper level of the company. And then something happens, you got to change and do it all over again.
right.
But, that's just part of our jobs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and actually that's the part we love, right? That
exactly.
it never gets boring and not the days are always different and because we do pivot and we stay agile, right? Because there's always a new challenge waiting for us. So, yeah,
Exactly.
I think, executive support professionals, we are going to be relevant. And I also want to give a shout out. I know we are focusing a lot on AI, on tech at the moment. But,
Yes,
don't forget the importance of soft skills out there.
exactly.
Because this is what we
Exactly.
own for decades, and this is what we bring to the table as well. Especially when
Right.
I talk about emotional intelligence, empathy, being
Hmm.
intuitive, this is something
Right.
where AIs will not be able to beat us,
No,
right?
they can. They can. And so it's funny because when AI, first started, becoming more popular, there were a lot of EAs that were, and then just articles around talking about is AI going to take over the jobs for assistants? And no,
Mhm.
no, mm-mm.
So
That's going to
true.
help us as assistants to be better and work faster.
Totally. Absolutely. So, Mia, we're coming to the last question, and maybe you want to share a little bit from your private life. We heard about the hubby who wanted a change, and there was either Atlanta or Texas.
Yes.
Is there anything else you want to share with us? What do you enjoy outside of work?
Let's see. Some private facts about me would be I have my real estate license. I did real estate part time
Ooh,
for about 10 years. And the funny thing is, I did it just evenings and weekends for friends and family as a hobby. And, it was a great, extra, thousands of dollars, maybe 30 or $40,000
fabulous.
a year. And, I was able to help people that were, friends and family. And I wasn't I was doing it as a hobby. I wasn't doing it for the 3% commission,
Right, right.
and then, so that's something that I did for about 9 or 10 years part-time. And then I also have a nail tech license. I got that
Mm-hmm.
back in 1995, and I did nails. I had a suite that I did on the weekend for maybe 2 or 3 years, but now I just keep up my license to get a discount on my hair products.
Very good.
Yes, and my late father, actually both of my parents are deceased, but my late father was a pastor. Not
Oh,
only did he work in the school system as a guidance counselor and a basketball coach, but he pastored a church for 25 years. So I am what they call a PK, pastor's kid. And it's funny
nice.
because when people say, when people learn that you're a pastor, they're like, oh, them is the wild ones, and it's like, and it's funny because sometimes I can live up to being a little wild. And sometimes I can have, sometimes the things that come out of my mouth are not of a PK's child, but I'm human. And it's funny because my dad knew me up and down. And, my dad was such a strong resource and accountability partner for me through my career. He's been gone for 10 years.
Oh,
But
oh.
if he could just see where I'm at now, because it was 15 years ago where I had an incident happen with my executive where I had just started that job and I had been there maybe, a couple of months, not even that. And that executive was very he was over sales, and he was very driven, and very vocal, very hot-headed, all the things. And it was funny because, like I said, I'd been there about 45 days and it was time for me to have my one-on-one. And this is where, I looked and saw he had hung up the phone. So I went back there, and I was at his doorway and I tapped on the door, and he said, just sit down.
Ooh.
And that's exactly how he said it. And so I, I leaned against the thing and I said, okay, now let me tell you something. That picture over there on your desk of your two kids, that's not me. You don't
Mhm.
talk to me like you may talk to them. So I don't know if you just had a bad experience on the call that you just hung up from. Do you need a minute? Do you need me to come back? Because one thing that I'm not going to tolerate is you speaking to me like that.
Yes.
Oh, no, Mia, no, no, I'm apologize. I'm so sorry. Just go ahead and sit down. So I sat down, got the little notes of the actions that he needed, and then I left. And I went back to my desk and I called my husband and said, I might be packing a box today. And he said, what do you mean? I told him what happened. I said, I just stood up. And he says, as you should have. That
Yes.
evening, I had a conversation with my dad and I told him what happened. And I said, I put my head back and my shoulders back and I spoke up for myself. I was crumbling inside because I was like, I may be on my way
Wow.
out the door. But then my dad reminded me that what is for you is for you.
True.
And you have to believe in yourself, no matter who you're talking to, if it's the janitor, if it's your peer, if it's your manager, if it's your executive, you have to stand up for you. And you have to do it with professionalism and with grace, with empathy. But you can't let anyone talk to you because that sets the precedence of how they
Yes.
will continue to treat you.
Exactly.
So you
Imagine you
have to
would.
know your worth. And my dad's slogan, his key line as he was in the elementary school, was he would tell the kids, you are somebody. And so it's funny, like when I would go to the elementary school to visit my dad, when I may have been off or whatever, and we'd be walking down the hall. And, when the kids are walking down the hall, they're in this straight line and they can't talk. It's, zip lift. And it's like when they would see him, they go, I am somebody.
Ah,
And they would mouth it. And that's, and then he instilled that in me that evening. He said, don't ever forget. He says, and don't ever feel like you're not valuable. He said,
yes.
and that is what I want you to carry with you. And I try to empower not only people on my team, but just people in general that know your worth, know your value because you are somebody.
Ah, bless him. Bless your dad. What a great wisdom. And it's
Yes.
so true. I think this was the perfect motivation kick at the end of our conversation because I can only imagine how many people needed to hear that, Mia,
Oh, yeah.
because they did not stand up for themselves. They were shy. They
Yeah.
were scared, because um yeah, but once you allow this to happen,
Mhm.
nothing will change. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for this powerful message at the end, because
Thank
I
you.
think many people needed to hear this, including me.
Yes, yes, it has been such a, great experience getting to meet you, and thank you for asking me to take part in your podcast. And, we are officially connected, and I look forward to seeing you next year at one of these events. And I'm
I
going to do
hope
all
so.
that I can to advocate to get you there. Yes,
That would be
I do.
such an honor. First of all, to hug you then, right? And to get together in person. But I can only say thank you so much for coming on the show. Such
Yeah,
valuable advice. And I can't wait to bring the episode out. So stay well. All the blessings to you and your family.
yes,
And thanks again for being here.
thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I can tell you there are quite some links waiting for you in the show notes if you want to connect with Mia and, of course, get to know what she stands for in terms of working within the association and how you can do some certification. It's all about leveling up, right? Upskilling. So we had an incredible role model here with us today. So thanks so much, Mia, for coming and for sharing your story.